The morning sky above New York City changed forever when the ships arrived. They came silently, appearing like silver tears in the blue heavens. The crystalline vessels hung motionless over every major city on Earth, their surfaces catching sunlight and throwing it back in rainbow patterns that hurt to look at directly. President Linda Walsh stood at the window of the White House Situation Room, watching the ship that hovered over Washington. She had been in office for 2 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The alien craft was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like a frozen waterfall made of metal and light. "Ma'am, we're getting a signal," said General Pete Harrison, his weathered face showing no emotion despite the chaos around them. Military advisors rushed back and forth, phones rang constantly, and computer screens flickered with data from around the globe. "Put it through," Linda said, turning away from the window. Her heart pounded, but her voice stayed steady. She was the President of the United States, and the world was watching. The main screen lit up with an image that made everyone in the room go silent. The being on the screen was tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Its eyes were large and silver, and when it spoke, its voice was musical but somehow cold. "Greetings, people of Earth," the alien said. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Cathani. We come with an offer that will change your world forever." Carlos Rivera, the UN Secretary General, leaned forward in his chair. He had flown to Washington as soon as the ships appeared. "What kind of offer?" he asked carefully. Veltar smiled, showing teeth that gleamed like pearls. "We offer you protection. Your world sits at the edge of dangerous space where savage races hunt for weak planets to destroy. We have watched your species grow, and we believe you have potential. Join the Galactic Protection Council and we will keep you safe." The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Dr. Amy Foster, the head of the National Science Foundation, stepped closer to the screen. She was young for her position, but her sharp mind had earned respect from everyone who worked with her. "Protection from what exactly?" Amy asked. "We don't know about any dangerous aliens out there." The ambassador's expression became serious. "The Vorthak raiders sweep through this region every few decades, taking slaves and resources. The machine collective called the Devourers consumes entire worlds, turning everything into fuel for their expansion. There are others too, species so violent that even speaking their names brings fear to civilized worlds." General Harrison crossed his arms. "And what would this protection cost us?" "Very little," Veltar replied smoothly. "You would contribute some of your world's resources to the Council. Iron, rare minerals, agricultural products. In return, we would establish monitoring stations to watch for threats. We would also need to oversee your military development, to ensure your weapons are used only for defense." Linda felt a chill run down her spine. Something about the way the ambassador said oversee didn't sound like a request. It sounded like control. "How long do we have to decide?" she asked. "1 month, Veltar said. "The Council is generous, but we cannot wait forever. The dangers in this region of space are real and growing. Every day you delay puts your world at greater risk." The transmission ended, leaving the room in tense silence. Outside, the crystalline ship continued to hover over the city, casting strange shadows on the streets below. Over the next few days, the world went into chaos. Some people panicked, convinced that the aliens would destroy Earth if humanity refused their offer. Others celebrated, believing that contact with advanced aliens would bring new technology and knowledge. Politicians debated endlessly on television, and religious leaders struggled to explain what the arrival meant for their faiths. Linda called an emergency session with world leaders. President Chen of China, Prime Minister Williams of Britain, Chancellor Muller of Germany, and dozens of others gathered via secure video link. The debate was fierce and divided. "This could be humanity's greatest opportunity," argued President Martinez of Brazil. "Think of what we could learn from them. Medicine, technology, energy solutions for climate change. At what cost?" shot back Prime Minister Johnson of Australia. "They want to control our military. That's not protection, that's occupation." Dr. Amy Foster had been studying every piece of data they could gather about the Cathani ships. She worked day and night, analyzing the energy signatures, the material composition, anything that might give insight into their true intentions. "There's something wrong with their story," she told Linda during a private meeting. "The energy readings from their ships show technology far beyond what they claim. If they're so advanced, why do they need our resources? Iron and minerals are common throughout the galaxy." General Harrison nodded grimly. I've been thinking the same thing. Why would such an advanced species bother with a primitive world like ours? Unless they want something specific that they're not telling us about. Meanwhile, Captain Jake Morrison was preparing for an unauthorized mission. He commanded the UES Horizon, Earth's most advanced exploration vessel. It wasn't much compared to the alien ships, but it was fast and well-equipped for deep space reconnaissance. "I'm taking the Horizon out past the outer planets," he told his crew. "If there really are dangerous aliens out there, we need to see the evidence for ourselves." His second-in-command, Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez, looked worried. "Sir, we don't have authorization for that kind of mission." "The brass will have our heads," Jake smiled grimly. "Sometimes you have to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. We're the only ones in position to get real intelligence about what's out there. The politicians can debate all they want, but we need facts." As the deadline approached, the debate on Earth grew more heated. Protesters filled the streets of major cities, some demanding acceptance of the alien offer, others calling for resistance. The Cathani ships remained silent and motionless, waiting for humanity's answer. In the White House, Linda stared at reports from around the world. Economic markets were in chaos, and some smaller nations were already declaring their intention to accept the Cathani offer, regardless of what the major powers decided. The weight of the decision pressed down on her shoulders. In 3 weeks, she would have to give an answer that would shape the future of human civilization. But first, she needed to know the truth about what was really waiting for them in the darkness between the stars. The UES Horizon moved through the darkness beyond Pluto, like a steel needle threading through black fabric. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the stars wheel slowly past as his ship pushed deeper into unexplored space. They had been traveling for 2 weeks, following energy traces that might lead to answers about the threats the Cathani claimed existed. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," reported Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez from the sensor station, debris field about 2 million kilometers ahead. "The composition readings are unusual." Jake moved to look over Sam's shoulder at the data streaming across the screen. "Define unusual." "Mixed materials. Some I recognize as standard spacecraft alloys, but others match the crystalline structure we detected from the Cathani ships. And sir, the debris field is massive. This wasn't just one ship that got destroyed." The Horizon approached the wreckage carefully. What they found made Jake's blood run cold. Twisted metal and shattered crystal floated in a graveyard that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. The remains of dozens of ships drifted silently through space, their hulls torn apart by weapons that had left distinctive energy burns. "My God," whispered Chief Engineer Kate Walsh as she studied the readings. "Some of these ships are huge. Look at this piece here. It's part of a hull that must have been over a kilometer long." Jake ordered the crew to collect samples and data from the wreckage. As they worked, a pattern began to emerge. Every ship in the debris field showed signs of the same type of weapon damage. The energy signatures matched those they had detected from Cathani technology. "Sir, you need to see this," called Ensign Mike Chen from the analysis station. He had been working on a piece of hull plating that still had markings on it. "I've been running these symbols through the translation program. It's a distress beacon, and I think I know what it says." The message was fragmentary, but the meaning was clear. The ship had been calling for help against attackers who had offered protection first. The final transmission spoke of betrayal and warned others not to trust the promises of the crystal ships. Back on Earth, Dr. Amy Foster was making discoveries of her own. She had been analyzing the energy patterns from the Cathani vessels, comparing them to known physics and looking for weaknesses or inconsistencies in their technology. "The power output doesn't match their stated capabilities," she explained to President Linda Walsh during an emergency briefing. "They claim to have ships designed for exploration and protection, but the energy signatures suggest weapons platforms. Heavy ones." General Pete Harrison leaned forward in his chair. "How heavy are we talking about?" "Planetary bombardment level," Amy said quietly. "Each of those ships hovering over our cities could glass entire continents if they wanted to. They're not here as protectors. They're here as conquerors." Linda felt sick. "Are you certain about this?" "As certain as I can be without actually examining one of their ships up close. But there's more. I've been tracking their communication patterns, and they're not just talking to us. They're sending regular transmissions to other parts of the galaxy. Coordination signals. Coordination for what? Unknown. But the pattern suggests they're part of a much larger fleet. What we're seeing might just be the advanced scouts. The revelation sent shockwaves through the highest levels of government. Linda authorized additional research while keeping the information classified. They needed more evidence before they could act on these suspicions. That evidence came when Captain Morrison's team made their most important discovery. Hidden within the debris field was a partially intact data core from one of the destroyed ships. The technology was different from anything human or Cathani, suggesting it came from a third species entirely. Working around the clock, the Horizon's computer specialist managed to extract fragments of information from the damaged core. The translation was slow and difficult, but what emerged painted a terrifying picture. The data core belonged to the Altarians, a peaceful species that had once controlled a small empire of 12 worlds. The records told of first contact with the Cathani, who had arrived with offers of protection and membership in their Galactic Protection Council. The Altarians had been suspicious at first, but the Cathani had been patient and persuasive. They pointed to real threats in the galaxy, showed evidence of destroyed worlds, and gradually convinced the Altarian leadership that cooperation was their only hope for survival. The protection had started small. A few monitoring stations, some restrictions on military development, regular tribute payments of resources. But each year the demands had grown larger. The Cathani had brought in advisors to help manage Altarian affairs. They had insisted on approving new technologies and governing policies. Within 50 years, the Altarians were slaves in all but name. Their once proud civilization had been reduced to resource extractors for the Cathani Empire. When they finally tried to rebel, the response had been swift and brutal. The crystalline ships that had once promised protection became instruments of genocide. The final entry in the data core was a desperate warning transmitted just before the last Altarian ship was destroyed. It told of dozens of other species that had fallen to the same pattern. The Cathani would arrive with offers of protection, gradually strip away independence, and finally crush any resistance with overwhelming force. Jake transmitted all the data back to Earth using encrypted channels. The evidence was undeniable. The Cathani were not protectors but predators, and humanity was their next target. In the White House Situation Room, the mood was grim as Linda reviewed the findings with her advisors. The deadline for their decision was only 1 week away, and now they knew the truth about their supposed benefactors. "We need to confront them with this evidence," suggested Carlos Rivera. "Show them that we know what they really are." General Harrison shook his head. "That would just force them to drop the pretense and attack immediately. Right now they think they have us fooled. That gives us a small advantage." "What kind of advantage?" Linda asked. "Time," Amy Foster said. "Time to prepare. If they think we're still considering their offer, they won't expect resistance. We can use that time to get ready for what's coming." "Ready how? Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." Amy smiled grimly. "Maybe not as far ahead as they think. I've been studying their energy patterns and I think I know how to build countermeasures. We might not be able to match their firepower, but we can surprise them." The next few days passed in a blur of secret preparations. Military contractors worked around the clock on new weapon designs based on Amy's research. Space Command quietly moved assets into position. Emergency protocols were activated for civilian populations, but the Cathani were not idle either. Their monitoring of human communications had detected increased military activity, and Ambassador Veltar was growing suspicious. 3 days before the deadline, the Cathani dropped their friendly mask. Veltar appeared on screens around the world, his expression cold and threatening. "People of Earth," he said, "we have detected military preparations that violate the spirit of our negotiations. You will cease these activities immediately and provide a decision on our generous offer. You have 72 hours to comply, or we will consider your intentions hostile." The ultimatum sent panic through the world's capitals. Some leaders called for immediate surrender, while others demanded defiance regardless of the cost. Linda stood at the same window where she had first seen the alien ship, but now she understood what she was really looking at. Not a savior from the stars, but a predator that had come to add Earth to its collection of conquered worlds. She turned to face her advisors, her decision made. "Get me a global communications link. It's time to give them our answer." The communication broadcast went live at exactly noon, Greenwich Mean Time. President Linda Walsh stood behind the presidential podium, flanked by world leaders who had gathered in Washington for this historic moment. Behind them, through the tall windows, the Cathani ship hung in the sky like a silver threat. Ambassador Veltar, Linda began, her voice carrying clearly across all channels. You offered Earth protection from threats in the galaxy. We have investigated your claims and we have found the threat you spoke of. On the main screen, Veltar's image appeared. His silver eyes narrowed as he sensed something different in the human leader's tone. And what threat is that, President Walsh? Linda's expression hardened. You. The words hung in the air for a moment of perfect silence. Then Veltar's facade of friendship cracked, revealing something cold and predatory underneath. We found the Altarian data core, Linda continued. We know about the 12 worlds you enslaved. We know about the Kethmoran civilization you wiped out when they refused your protection. We know what your Galactic Protection Council really is, a conquest machine that feeds on the freedom of others. Veltar stood slowly, his tall frame filling the screen. Around the globe, the crystalline ships began to shift position, no longer content to hover peacefully over cities. You have made a grave error, the ambassador said, his musical voice now carrying undertones of menace. We offered you a place among the civilized species of the galaxy. Since you prefer to remain with the savages, you will share their fate. The transmission cut to static, and immediately alarms began ringing in command centers around the world. The Cathani ships were powering up their weapons, but humanity was not the helpless prey the aliens expected. General Pete Harrison smiled grimly as he watched the tactical displays light up with incoming threats. All units, this is command. Execute Operation Defiance. What the Cathani had not known was that the month of negotiations had been used for more than just debate. Every major military power on Earth had been preparing for this moment, sharing technology and resources in ways that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. The first surprise came when the Cathani tried to disable Earth's military satellites. The aliens fired precisely targeted energy pulses designed to knock out communication and surveillance networks. But the satellites they hit were hardened against electromagnetic pulses and equipped with backup systems that Amy Foster's team had designed. Instead of going dark, Earth's orbital network came alive with activity. Hidden weapon platforms that had been disguised as civilian satellites revealed their true nature. Nuclear-pumped lasers and kinetic interceptors fired in coordinated volleys at the Cathani ships. The alien vessels, expecting to face primitive projectile weapons at best, were caught off guard by the advanced energy weapons. Several ships took damage before they could raise their shields to full power. In Nevada, the world's largest railgun installation charged up and fired a tungsten projectile at near light speed. The kinetic round punched through the shields of the Cathani ship over Los Angeles, sending it spinning out of control and crashing into the Pacific Ocean. First blood to humanity, reported Colonel Lisa Chen from the Orbital Defense Command. Her voice was steady, but inside she was amazed that their desperate plan was actually working. The Cathani response was swift and brutal. Energy beams lanced down from their ships, turning military installations into craters of molten glass. But many of their primary targets were not where intelligence had suggested they would be. Dummy installations exploded in spectacular fashion, while the real command centers, hidden underground or in seemingly civilian buildings, continued to coordinate the defense. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez found himself at the controls of an experimental fighter craft that combined human engineering with reverse-engineered Cathani technology. The hybrid ship responded to his thoughts as much as his touch, dancing through the sky in ways that no conventional aircraft could match. This is Raptor 1, he called over the radio as he lined up a shot on a Cathani support craft. Engaging enemy vessel over Chicago. The fight was unlike anything in human history. Energy weapons painted the sky in brilliant colors while kinetic rounds streaked between the stars. The Cathani had superior individual ships, but they had underestimated human adaptability and coordination. In the midst of the battle, Captain Jake Morrison received new orders. The UES Horizon had been upgraded with experimental faster-than-light capability, based on technology stolen from the Cathani ships. His mission was desperate but vital. Reach other worlds in Cathani space and rally any surviving resistance movements. Sir, this is basically a suicide mission, pointed out his chief engineer, Kate Walsh, as she reviewed the mission parameters. We don't know if the FTL drive will even work, and if it does, we'll be going into the heart of enemy territory. Jake nodded grimly. I know. But if there are other species out there fighting the Kithani, they need to know they're not alone. And if we can coordinate our resistance with theirs, we might actually have a chance. The Horizon launched from a hidden facility in Antarctica, while the battle raged overhead. The ship's new drive system engaged with a sound like reality tearing, and suddenly they were among the stars, traveling faster than light toward the unknown. Back on Earth, the fighting continued through the day and into the night. The Kithani had called in reinforcements, but humanity's resistance was fiercer than anything they had encountered before. Every destroyed human installation seemed to be replaced by 2 more hidden positions. Every downed fighter pilot was replaced by another volunteer, eager to strike back at the invaders. Dr. Amy Foster worked frantically in her underground laboratory, analyzing wreckage from the crashed Kithani ship. I need more time, she called to her assistants as explosions shook the facility above them. There's something in their command network protocols that I can almost crack. Doc, the fighting is getting closer, warned her security chief, Major Steve Cooper. We might need to evacuate soon. Not yet, Amy insisted, her fingers flying over the keyboard. I think I can break into their communication system. If I can do that, we might be able to coordinate with resistance movements on other worlds. The battle reached a turning point when human forces managed to capture an intact Kithani communication array. The aliens had assumed their encryption was unbreakable by a primitive species like humanity, but they had not counted on the combination of human intuition and computer processing power. When Amy finally cracked the code, what she found changed everything. The Kithani communication network was vast, spanning hundreds of star systems, but scattered throughout the traffic were hidden signals, coded messages from resistance groups that had managed to survive the conquest of their worlds. My God, Amy whispered as she read the translated messages. There are dozens of them. Altarians who escaped the genocide, machine intelligences from the Nexus worlds, even some Kithani who oppose what their government has become. President Walsh, coordinating the defense from a bunker beneath Washington, received Amy's report with amazement. Can you contact them? I think so. The communication protocols are complex, but I believe I can send a message that will reach the resistance networks. They need to know that someone is finally fighting back. As dawn broke over a scarred but unbowed Earth, Amy Foster sent humanity's first message to the galactic resistance. It was simple but powerful. Earth has refused Kithani protection and is fighting back. We are not alone, and neither are you. The response came within hours. Hidden rebels across the galaxy began transmitting messages of support and coordination. For the first time in centuries, the Kithani faced organized resistance on multiple fronts. In space above Earth, Veltar watched his fleet struggle against the unexpectedly fierce human defense. These primitives were supposed to be easy prey like all the others. Instead, they were fighting with a ferocity and innovation that reminded him uncomfortably of the early days of Kithani expansion, when his own people had been rebels fighting against galactic tyranny. He activated his personal communication channel and sent a priority message to the Kithani High Command. The humans are more dangerous than anticipated. Recommend immediate deployment of the full conquest fleet. But as his message traveled across the galaxy, it was intercepted and decoded by Amy Foster's team. Earth now knew that the real invasion was yet to come. The UES Horizon emerged from faster-than-light travel in a system that the stolen Kithani data indicated was called Altair Prime. What Captain Jake Morrison found there was both heartbreaking and inspiring. The once beautiful world was scarred by orbital bombardment, its cities reduced to ruins, but in the asteroid belt surrounding the dead planet, hidden bases still operated. Unknown vessel, identify yourself or be destroyed, came a transmission in accented but understandable English. The translation software had worked, converting alien languages into familiar words. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Horizon, Jake replied. We're here to fight the Kithani. There was a long pause before a new voice came through the comm system. Earth, the primitive world at the galaxy's edge? You're supposed to be under negotiation for protection status. We told them what they could do with their protection, Jake said grimly, and we're looking for others who feel the same way. Within hours, Jake found himself aboard a hidden base built inside a hollowed-out asteroid. The commander was a being who introduced himself as Zeph, one of the last Altarian military officers. His people were tall and thin, with pale green skin and large golden eyes that held depths of sadness. "Your species has done something remarkable," Zeph said as he studied the technical data Jake had brought about Earth's resistance. "In over 300 years of Cathani expansion, no world has ever successfully fought back during the initial contact phase." "What usually happens?" Jake asked. "Most species accept the protection offer, believing they have no choice. Those who refuse are destroyed before they can organize effective resistance. The Cathani have perfected the art of conquest through intimidation and overwhelming force." Zeph led Jake through the base, showing him the remnants of what had once been a proud civilization. The Altarians had been master engineers, and even their refugee facilities showed incredible technical skill. But they were a broken people, reduced to hiding in asteroid caves while their homeworld lay dead below them. "We've been fighting a guerrilla war for decades," Zeph explained. "Hit-and-run attacks, sabotage, disruption of supply lines. But we could never do enough damage to matter. The Cathani just replace whatever we destroy and continue with their expansion." "That's about to change," Jake said. "Earth is rallying every resistance group in the galaxy. We're going to coordinate our attacks and hit them everywhere at once." Zeph's golden eyes widened. "That's impossible. The Cathani control all communication networks. Any attempt at galaxy-wide coordination would be detected and stopped." Jake smiled. "Not if we use their own network against them. We've cracked their encryption." The revelation sent shockwaves through the hidden base. Within hours, Jake was in contact with resistance leaders from across the galaxy. There was Crix, a machine intelligence from the Nexus worlds whose people had been enslaved to mine rare minerals. Commander Torres led human refugees who had escaped when Earth's colony ship Endeavor was captured 20 years earlier. Even some Cathani joined the resistance, disgusted by what their government had become. Back on Earth, the situation was growing desperate. The initial Cathani fleet had been reinforced twice, and now over 100 alien ships surrounded the planet. The space battle raged continuously, with human losses mounting despite their initial successes. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez had become an ace pilot, but even his enhanced fighter was showing the strain of constant combat. "Rodriguez to base," he called as he limped back from his latest mission. "We're running low on ammunition and replacement parts. How much longer can we keep this up?" "As long as it takes," replied Colonel Lisa Chen from the Orbital Command Center. "Intelligence says the main Cathani fleet is still 3 days out. We just need to hold on until then. And then what? The main fleet will have 1,000 ships. Then we spring the trap." Dr. Amy Foster had been working around the clock since the fighting began, not just on communication systems, but on something far more dangerous. Using technology reverse-engineered from the crashed Cathani ship, she had built what she called a network virus, a computer program designed to spread through the alien command systems and cause chaos. "The beauty of it," she explained to President Walsh during a brief break in the fighting, "is that the Cathani never expected to face cyber wars from a primitive species. Their network security is designed to stop physical attacks, not information warfare. Will it work? Unknown. But if I can get this virus into their main fleet's command network, it should disrupt their coordination enough to give our people a fighting chance." The plan was risky and required perfect timing. When the main Cathani fleet arrived, Amy would need to hack into their flagship and upload the virus while human forces launched their largest coordinated attack. In space around Earth, the fighting had evolved into a complex dance of destruction. Human ships, smaller and more maneuverable than the Cathani vessels, used hit-and-run tactics that frustrated the aliens. The Cathani were used to overwhelming their enemies with superior firepower. But humans refused to stand still long enough to be overwhelmed. Captain Bill Harrison, General Pete Harrison's nephew, commanded a squadron of the hybrid fighters that combined human and Cathani technology. His ships could operate both in space and in atmosphere, giving them tactical flexibility that confused the alien commanders. "Blue Squadron, this is Blue Leader," he called as his formation approached a Cathani heavy cruiser. "Remember, target their shield generators first, then their weapon systems. Don't get fancy, just get the job done and get out." The attack went like clockwork. Human fighters swarmed over the massive alien ship. their weapons precisely targeting weak points that Dr. Foster's team had identified. Within minutes, the cruiser was drifting powerless, its crew evacuating in escape pods. But for every victory, humanity paid a price. The orbital platforms that had given them such an advantage in the early fighting were being systematically destroyed by Cathani bombardment. Military bases around the world lay in ruins, and civilian casualties were mounting despite evacuation efforts. The real test came when the main Cathani fleet arrived. Over 1,000 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, their crystalline hulls glittering like deadly stars. At the center of the formation was the flagship, a massive vessel that dwarfed everything else in the fleet, Admiral Velketh, Supreme Commander of the Cathani Conquest Fleet, studied the tactical displays with growing irritation. The humans had proven far more troublesome than any previous species, but that would end now. He had brought enough firepower to crack planets, and one small world would not defy the might of the Cathani Empire. "Begin the final attack," he ordered. "I want this resistance crushed within the day." But as the fleet moved toward Earth, Amy Foster was already at work. Using the captured communication array, she began the delicate process of hacking into the flagship's computer network. The virus she had created was a thing of beauty, designed to spread through connected systems like a digital plague. Around the galaxy, resistance groups that had been hiding for decades began to move. On Nexus Prime, Crix led an army of liberated machines against the Cathani mining operations. In the ruins of Altair Prime, Zeph's fighters emerged from their asteroid bases to attack supply convoys. Human refugees from the captured colony ships turned on their captors with weapons smuggled by the resistance. For the first time in centuries, the Cathani faced rebellion on hundreds of fronts simultaneously. Their communication networks, compromised by Amy's virus, began to malfunction just when coordination was most critical. The galaxy was rising up, and at the center of it all, Earth prepared for the battle that would determine the fate of freedom among the stars. The final battle began at dawn, Earth time, with the largest space combat engagement in human history. Admiral Velketh's massive fleet moved toward Earth like a silver tide of destruction. But they were not facing the same desperate defenders who had fought the advance force. Captain Jake Morrison had returned from his mission with more than just intelligence. Following his ship were vessels from a dozen different species, all united by their hatred of Cathani oppression. The resistance fleet was small compared to the invasion force, but it carried something that Cathani had forgotten existed: hope. "All ships, this is Morrison," Jake called over the combined fleet communications. "Today we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every world that ever said no to tyranny. Let's remind the galaxy what freedom looks like." The virus Dr. Amy Foster had planted in the Cathani network chose that moment to activate fully. Across the enemy fleet, communication systems began to fail. Navigation computers provided false readings, and weapon targeting systems turned against their own ships. The perfectly coordinated Cathani formation dissolved into chaos as ships collided with each other or fired on their own escorts. "It's working," Amy shouted from her command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. "The virus is spreading through their entire network. I'm reading system failures across their whole fleet." But Admiral Velketh was not helpless. As his command systems failed around him, he switched to backup protocols and began issuing orders through short-range communications. The Cathani were skilled warriors, and even in chaos they remained dangerous. "All ships revert to individual combat protocols," he ordered. "Destroy everything that opposes us. No prisoners, no mercy." The space battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Human and alien ships danced between planets and moons, using the solar system itself as a battlefield. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez found himself leading a desperate attack on a Cathani dreadnought that was bombarding the lunar colonies. "This is for everyone who ever dreamed of the stars," he whispered as he lined up his final attack run. His fighter was damaged and his weapons nearly depleted, but he pressed on toward the massive enemy ship. The dreadnought's point defense systems had been confused by the virus, firing at phantom targets while real threats slipped through. Sam's torpedo struck the ship's main reactor, and the explosion lit up space like a new sun. On Earth's surface, the ground war was equally fierce. Cathani troops, their crystalline armor glinting in the sunlight, had landed in major cities around the world, but they found themselves facing not just military forces, but civilian populations that refused to surrender. In New York, office workers threw Molotov cocktails from skyscraper windows. In London, retired soldiers emerged from pubs with hunting rifles and homemade bombs. In Tokyo, martial arts masters led street fighting units that used the city's maze of alleys to ambush alien patrols. The Cathani had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never faced anything like human stubbornness. Every building became a fortress, every street a killing ground. The aliens found that taking Earth cities required them to fight for every block, every room, every inch of ground. Colonel Lisa Chen coordinated the defense of Washington from a bunker beneath the Pentagon. Her forces were a mixture of regular military, National Guard, and armed civilians who had volunteered to fight for their world. "They're pushing hard on the eastern approach," reported Major Steve Cooper, "but our people are holding. The aliens don't seem to know how to handle irregular warfare." "That's because they're used to fighting civilized opponents," Lisa replied grimly. "We're not being civilized. We're being human." In space, the battle was reaching its climax. Captain Jake Morrison led a mixed squadron of human and alien ships in a desperate assault on Admiral Velketh's flagship. The massive vessel was the command center for the entire invasion, and destroying it would cripple Cathani coordination even further. "This is it," Jake called to his pilots as they approached the heavily defended ship. "Everything we've fought for comes down to this moment. Let's finish what we started." The flagship's defenses were formidable, but they had been designed to fight conventional space battles, not the swirling chaos that Jake's mixed force created. Human fighters wove between the defensive fire, while Altarian ships provided long-range support, and liberated Cathani vessels turned their weapons against their former masters. President Linda Walsh, watching the battle from the White House bunker, found herself holding her breath as the attack developed. The fate of human civilization hung in the balance, but she felt a strange calm. Whatever happened, humanity had proven something important about itself. Dr. Amy Foster was not content to watch. From her position in the communication center, she launched a final cyber attack against the flagship's computers. This time she wasn't trying to spread chaos. She was trying to break through to the ship's main database and broadcast its contents to every resistance group in the galaxy. "If I can crack their main files," she explained to her assistants, "we can expose every Cathani operation, every conquered world, every lie they've told about protecting the galaxy." The data breach succeeded just as Jake's assault force reached the flagship's hull. As human Marines fought their way through crystalline corridors, Amy's virus downloaded terabytes of classified information and began broadcasting it across the galaxy. The effect was immediate and devastating. On worlds throughout Cathani space, populations that had been told they were protected from savage aliens learned the truth about their supposed benefactors. The broadcast included detailed records of the Cathani's conquest campaigns, their use of client species as slave labor, and their long-term plans for galactic domination. On the flagship, Admiral Velketh found himself trapped in his own command center as human forces closed in. He activated a communication channel to Earth's leadership, his silver eyes filled with a mixture of rage and something that might have been respect. "You have destroyed an empire that stood for 1,000. Here's," he said to President Walsh. "Was your primitive freedom worth the chaos you have unleashed?" Linda looked directly at the alien commander through the video link. "Ask me again in another 1,000 years. If we're still free, then yes, it was worth it." The flagship's destruction marked the end of organized Cathani resistance in Earth's solar system. Across the galaxy, the revelation of their true nature triggered revolts on hundreds of worlds. The carefully constructed empire began to collapse as subject species remembered what it meant to be free. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Earth's cities lay in ruins, millions were dead, and the planet's infrastructure was shattered. The survivors faced the enormous task of rebuilding their world while helping to establish a new order among the stars. 6 months later, President Walsh stood in the ruins of the United Nations building in New York, addressing representatives from across the galaxy. The Galactic Liberation Alliance, as it had come to be called, was very different from the Cathani Protection Council. "We offer no protection," she said to the assembled delegates. "We offer partnership. We ask for no tribute, demand no oversight of your affairs, and claim no authority over your choices. What we offer is simple: the right to remain free, and the promise that we will stand together against any who would take that freedom away. In the audience, Ambassador Veltar, now a prisoner awaiting trial for war crimes, listened to the human leader's words. His aide, a young Kithani named Kelthara who had joined the resistance, leaned close to him. "She means it, doesn't she?" Kelthara whispered. "They really don't want to rule us." Veltar nodded slowly. "That is what makes them so dangerous. They offer something we never could." "What's that?" "Hope." Outside the ruined building, construction crews worked to rebuild the city. Human and alien workers labored side by side, not as masters and subjects, but as equals united in a common cause. General Pete Harrison, now serving as Earth's military liaison to the Alliance, watched the work with satisfaction. A young reporter approached him wanting to know how humanity had managed to defeat such a powerful enemy. "We asked the right question," Harrison said simply. "When someone offers you protection, the first thing you should ask is, protection from what? And the second thing you should ask is, who's going to protect you from your protectors?" The reporter looked confused. "But how did you know to ask those questions?" Harrison smiled. "Because we're human. Asking uncomfortable questions is what we do. It's what makes us free." As the sun set over the scarred but unconquered Earth, the words that had started the rebellion echoed across the galaxy. They came with an offer of protection. Earth answered, "From whom?" And in that simple question lay the seed of liberation that would grow among the stars for generations to come. The galaxy had learned that there was indeed something to fear in the darkness between worlds. Not the savage aliens the Kithani had warned about, but something far more dangerous to tyrants everywhere. The idea that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter the odds.